Episode 2 The Shadow Man. Welcome to the dark side of reality. Hi, I'm Tyler, and welcome back to After Dark, the Night Otter Files. I'm truly grateful you're here tonight. By choosing to listen, you've entered a space where the familiar and the strange coexist. Where the world you think you know bends ever so slightly, and where reality can feel thinner than it appears in daylight. This show is a slow unraveling of the unknown, an intimate space to explore the things we sense but cannot always explain. I started this podcast because I've spent my life walking on the edges of perception, noticing the subtle ways that reality can bend or whisper to us, leaving traces that most dismiss. The quiet brush of something unseen across a room, the fleeting sensation of a presence, a feeling so profound it stops you in your tracks. These moments have shaped me, made me curious, and sometimes left me questioning everything I thought I understood about life and the world around me. Here we slow down, we linger, we explore, and we honor the unknown not as a source of fear, but as a mirror of consciousness. A reflection of the fragile, permeable boundary between what we know and what we can only feel. This is not about jump scares. It's not about dramatization or theatrics. It's about observing, reflecting, and sharing experiences that touch the soul in ways that words often fail to capture. Tonight's story is one of those experiences. One that forever changed the way I perceive that thin veil between what is tangible and what is not. It began in the quietest, most vulnerable hours of the morning. A time when the world is suspended between night and day, and when the mind is at one, foggy, and hyper-aware. It was around 5 a.m. The darkness in my bedroom was absolute. The kind of darkness that feels like it could swallow sound, thoughts, and even consciousness itself. My cat Lily, who has her own rigid schedule, was up as she always is, insisting that breakfast was not merely a want, but an emergency of cosmic importance. Her paws thumped against the hardwood floor, soft and insistent. Her meows, low and commanding, echoed through the silence, tugging me from a sleep that was both deep and weightless. Even in my semi-conscious state, part of me still clinging to a dream that had no name. I knew I had no choice but to get up and respond. She was patient in her persistence, but yet, in her insistence, carried the authority of something elemental, unavoidable. It is a strange experience, being woken up not by urgency, but by a creature whose rhythm of life seems completely unaffected by human fatigue. I could feel every fiber of my body protesting as I pushed myself up from the mattress, every joint heavy, every nerve still curled in the remnants of a dream. The kitchen was cold and quiet. I opened the bag of cat food. The sound of rustling plastic, sharp in the stillness, startled me more than I expected. Lily immediately began eating, completely absorbed, oblivious to the tension that clung to the air around me. I watched for a moment, fascinated by her single-minded presence. She exists entirely in the moment, undistracted by fear, doubt, or curiosity. And then with the task completed, I returned to bed, slipping beneath the covers with the hope of reclaiming the fragile threads of sleep that remained. My body sank into the mattress. My mind hovered at the threshold between wakefulness and dreams, a liminal space where the ordinary world feels unreal and the extraordinary feels possible. And then it began. The first sound that would change the course of my morning and perhaps my understanding of reality itself. A slow, deliberate creak. The bedroom door was opening. At first I told myself it was imagination, a trick of the half-conscious mind, a remnant of a dream, sleep paralysis, I reasoned. A figment, but the sound persisted, inch by inch, deliberate and undeniably real. My rational mind scrambled for explanations, searching desperately for something logical, something grounded, but the world I had built in my mind as safe was fracturing, quietly and possibly around me. I froze, my heart raced, every nerve in my body stood on edge. The darkness in the room pressed down like a tangible weight, thick and suffocating. And then I saw him. A man, his form was tall, somewhere between 5'10" and 5'11", standing less than 3 feet from my bed. Every feature was swallowed by the darkness. I could not see his face, yet his presence was undeniable. He radiated a quiet, undeniable authority, a stillness so complete that it seemed to command the air around him. There was no aggression, no threat, only presence. Time elongated, my body refused to move, my voice was gone, my mind scrambled in the desperate hope for rationality. He simply stood there, still, observing, as if waiting for me to acknowledge him, not with words, but with recognition. And then it happened. Against every instinct, every rational thought, a single word, trembling and raw, escaped from me. Help! It was enough. He moved not aggressively, but with purpose. His hands found my arms, rubbing slowly, deliberately, a gesture of comfort I could not explain. A grounding touch that whispered reassurance without sound. Shh, Ty, it's okay. It's okay. And in that moment, the impossible became intimate. Something in him, his presence, his motion, the very energy he carried, felt familiar. Like a memory buried too deep to name, a recognition without history. The fear so potent just moments before dissolved slowly. My breathing found rhythm. The suffocating darkness, once oppressive, became a strange, almost comforting cloak. And in that embrace of impossibility, I drifted back into sleep with him there, watching and comforting me. The light of morning felt almost alien after what had happened. It wasn't bright or harsh, it was soft, muted, filtering gently through the edges of my blackout curtains. But even this gentle light seemed too real, too solid, and too normal after the liminal hours I had just survived. The bed beneath me felt ordinary, the air still and familiar, but in every corner of the room I could feel the residue of something extraordinary. The weight of what had happened pressed gently against my awareness, like a memory still unfolding, a thread that refused to be tied off neatly. I sat there for a long time, unsure if I should move, unsure if the room would still hold him if I did. My heartbeat, though slowed from the intensity of the encounter, still rattled in my chest. Every instinct told me to rationalize, to dismiss it as a dream, a hallucination, or a fragment of some half-conscious mind. But my body, the tension in my shoulders, the residual warmth of my arms where he had touched me, the inexplicable weight in the air told a different story. This was real. It was undeniably, uncomfortably real. I thought back to every noise in the night, every creak of the floorboards I had ignored, every shadow I had feared, every sensation I had attributed to imagination. And I realized something. Perhaps I had been noticing presences all along, brushing past them without understanding, without acknowledgement. This figure, this impossible presence, had been here with me, and yet I had felt more seen in that moment than in countless interactions with people in the daylight world. The door was always locked, remained locked. I checked it repeatedly, fingers trembling, heart racing with a mix of fear and awe. Nothing could have entered, and yet something did. It had moved through the barrier, not in a way that defined physics in the dramatic sense, but in a way that transcended ordinary understanding. I had been touched by something that did not belong entirely to this realm, and the memory of it hummed through the room like a living thing. I reflected on the sensation of his hands on my arms, the comfort, the grounding, the impossibly familiar recognition that had threaded through the fear. It stayed with me. I realized then that fear and safety are not always opposites. Sometimes the most profound comfort comes wrapped in the most inexplicable circumstances. Sometimes the unknown does not threaten. It holds. It guides. It acknowledges the parts of us that long for recognition in ways we cannot articulate. I found myself thinking about why this encounter had chosen me, why it had happened in that hour, in that space under the cloak of darkness that swallowed the world outside. Perhaps it was about vulnerability, about being fully present in a moment where everything familiar was stripped away. Perhaps it was about attention, the attention I gave to the quiet, the stillness, the unseen. Or perhaps it was simply a reminder that reality is far more complex, far more permeable than we allow ourselves to imagine in the safe, measured light of the day. I began to notice subtle signs in the room that I hadn't before, little details that now felt meaningful, the way a curtain fluttered even though no window was open, the faint scent that lingered in the air, the soft pressure of the floorboards that seemed to echo even after the figure had gone. These were not evidence in a logical sense, but they were markers in the landscape of awareness, proof that my senses had registered something real, something profoundly intimate, something that demanded reflection rather than dismissal. As I sat there, the experience expanded in my mind. I replayed it slowly, deliberately, like a meditation. The darkness of the room became more than a backdrop. It became a canvas for perception, a mirror reflecting the fragile boundary between known and unknown. The presence of the figure was no longer terrifying. It was almost instructional. It taught me that awareness is a skill, that attention is a bridge between worlds, and that even in fear, there is a possibility of insight, recognition, and profound connection. I thought about the phrase, the thin veil, which I often use to describe the boundary between reality and the unknown. It is not a rigid line. It is a porous, flexible, alive sometimes, in moments of stillness and vulnerability. It stretches enough for the unseen to reach through. And when it does not always shout. It does not always appear in forms we understand. Sometimes it comes gently, silently in ways that challenge everything we believe about ourselves and the world. I considered my own reactions: fear, disbelief, awe, and ultimately surrender. I realized that surrender was not defeat, it was acknowledgement, acceptance, presence. That figure's touch had allowed me to feel this in a way that words cannot describe. And as I sat there, the morning light washing over the room and the slow, gentle waves, I understood that this was the lesson. The unknown does not always need explanation. Sometimes it simply needs recognition, presence, and reflection. Even hours later, as I moved through my morning routine, the echo of that presence lingered. I could feel it in the rhythm of my heartbeat, and the tension of my shoulders, and the quiet spaces between thoughts. I realized that some encounters do not end when the figure leaves. They persist in consciousness, and awareness, and the subtle reshaping of perception. And in that persistence, there is teaching, there is guidance, there is the reminder that life in its deepest, most mysterious layers is far stranger and more profound than we allow ourselves to admit. As the day unfolded, I kept returning in my mind to what had happened in the quiet hours before sunrise, that impossible presence in my bedroom, the touch that had been neither threatening nor ordinary, the sense of recognition that defied time and memory. These were not things I could dismiss, not moments to be shoved in the back of my mind with rational explanations. They demanded attention, they demanded reflection, they demanded that I consider the boundaries of reality, the very nature of perception, and the ways in which life, quiet, subtle, and unseen, communicates with us when we are willing to listen. I thought about the veil that separates the known from the unknown, the seen from the unseen. And in that moment, the veil was not a barrier, it was a membrane, permeable and alive. It responded to attention, presence, and vulnerability. It revealed that what we often label impossible or imagined can in fact be profoundly real in its own way. The figure in my room, comforting me in the darkness, was a reminder that reality is more flexible than we like to admit, and that sometimes the unseen is not a threat to fear, but a guide to heed. Reflecting further, I realized that encounters like this are lessons in courage and curiosity. They ask us to stand still when the instinct is to flee, to listen when the impulse is to speak, and to perceive when the mind demands explanation. The figure's presence was a silent teacher. It was showing me that the awareness itself is sacred. That noticing the small, subtle shifts in energy and attention can lead to profound understanding, and that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the doorway to perception. I also thought about trust. Trust in the unseen, trust in the world's layers that cannot always be explained, trust in one's intuition, and trust in the deep, subtle wisdom that sometimes comes through unexpected encounters. We are so often trained to fear what we do not understand, to dismiss what cannot be logically categorized, to prioritize reason over experience. And yet, here was a moment that defied reason entirely, leaving only experience and the quiet, reverent lessons it carried. I spent hours afterward in quiet contemplation, replaying the events in my mind like meditation. Every detail, the sound of the door, the pressure of his hands, the inexplicable familiarity remained vivid. But more than the details, it was the feeling that lingered, the awareness that I had been touched by something beyond ordinary comprehension, and that touch had changed me, subtly, but irrevocably. It reshaped my understanding of presence, of safety, and of the strange luminous ways that reality reaches beyond the boundaries we perceive. Even now, as I sit here sharing this with you, the memory is alive. It is not frightening anymore, not in the way it was when I first awoke. It is intimate, it is instructive, it is a quiet whisper in the edges of consciousness that reminds me why I started After Dark, the Night Otter Files. It is a reminder that these experiences, whether in the stillness of night, the shadows of our homes, or the spaces between thought and awareness, deserve attention, contemplation, and reverence. So tonight, as you sit in your own quiet spaces, consider this. The world is far stranger than we often admit. The veil between the known and unknown is thinner than we realize. And in the moments we pay attention, and the moments we allow ourselves to be present, there is wisdom to be found, lessons to be learned, and experiences that can shift us in ways we cannot fully anticipate. Thank you for being with me tonight, and for following me into the darkness. Stay curious, stay kind, and don't stop believing in the paranormal. Hi, it's me, Tyler. And if you're here listening to my show right now, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for believing in me, for believing in what I'm creating here. and for trusting me with your time, your curiosity, and your openness to the unknown. It truly means more than I can put into words that you chose to be here tonight, to listen, to reflect, and to sit with these stories alongside me. Whether you've experienced something unexplained yourself, or you're simply curious about the mysteries that surround us, I'm grateful you're part of this journey. This space exists because of you, because of listeners who are willing to slow down, listen closely, and believe that there's more to this world than what we see in the light of day. So thank you for tuning in, for supporting After Dark, the Night Otter Files, and for walking this path with me. Follow me into the dark next week for episode 3.